The fist hit the hood so hard the whole Silverado rocked. "Get this junk out of here. You don't belong." The security guard's voice cracked with authority he didn't own. Jack Harlan never raised his eyes from the steering wheel at first. He simply cut the ignition at 4:12 p.m. that Thursday in mid-July, looked once in the rearview at his 8-year-old son Milo gripping that faded blue teddy bear like it was armor, and stepped down into the heat. Nobody at that wrought iron gate had any idea the man they had just humiliated had bought far more than the $2.8 million estate at the top of the hill. In 90 minutes, every paycheck on this property would carry his signature. The only question left was what exactly was hidden behind the faded work shirt and the cracked windshield. Jack Harlan was 41. 14 years as a Navy helicopter pilot, flying MH-60 Seahawks off carriers in 287 missions. Then Claire died at 39 after a brutal 14-month fight with aggressive lymphoma. He sold the aviation diagnostics firm he had built from nothing in a garage, cashed every chip, and used every last dime to buy the exact house she used to point at through that same cracked windshield on Sunday drives back when they had $400 in the bank and a dream that felt impossible. He did it so Milo could grow up on the street his mother had chosen. The gate at Oakwood Ridge looked like a castle drawbridge that afternoon. 14 feet of black steel topped with gold spear points. It had never opened for a battered green 2012 Chevy Silverado with a ladder in the bed and drywall dust on the floorboards. Jack rolled the window down with the hand crank. The mechanism squeaked the way it always did. Afternoon. Jack Harlan, 221 Oakwood Crest Lane. Closing was Tuesday. Static hissed from the speaker. Then a bored voice. "Deliveries go to the service gate." "I'm not a delivery. I live here." The laugh that came back was sharp, familiar. The same one Jack had heard at hospital desks, at parts counters, at banks when he showed up straight off a job site in scuffed boots. A moment later, the guard tower door opened. Victor Lang, 34, thick shoulders stretching his crisp uniform, mirrored Oakley's even in the shade, name tag polished to a mirror, walked up with thumbs hooked in his belt. He looked past Jack at the cracked vinyl seats, the toolbox, the boy in the back, and did the math wrong. "Got a work order?" "Don't need one. Need the gate opened." Victor leaned an arm on the roof. The truck dipped under the weight. "I've been on this post 2 years. I know every resident by their car. Never seen this truck. Never seen you." Jack's voice stayed flat, almost gentle. "Look up the name." Victor's hand moved to the radio. "Step out and keep your hands where I can see them." Jack obeyed slowly. 10 and 2 on the wheel first, the way they teach teenagers, because Milo was 3 feet behind him watching his father get spoken to like a criminal on land they now owned. "There's a folder in the glove box. Deed, title, photo ID. All 4 have my name on them." Victor made him pull onto the shoulder and kill the engine anyway. The engine ticked in the heat. At 4:19, the second guard appeared. Marcus Reed, 22, skinny, nervous, name tag still shiny from orientation 3 months earlier. He took the folder through the passenger window. Jack watched the young man's face change page by page, the same sick realization every person gets when their stomach figures it out before their mouth does. Marcus looked at the county recorder stamp in blue ink. "Sir, 221 Crest is the big one. The one with the private inner gate." "I know. I bought it." Milo waved from the back seat. Marcus waved back before he could stop himself, a small human reflex in the middle of the standoff. From the booth, Victor barked, "Step away from the vehicle." Marcus handed the folder back, ears scarlet. "I'm sorry, sir. I only started in April." "You looked," Jack said quietly, voice low enough only Marcus could hear. "Remember that. It's going to matter." At 4:27, a white Mercedes G-Wagon rolled down the interior drive and stopped nose to nose with the closed gate. Eleanor Whitmore, 59, 11-term vice president of the Oakwood Ridge HOA, stepped out in a spotless cream Chanel suit and red-bottom Louboutin heels that cost more than Jack's entire transmission rebuild. She carried a thin leather portfolio and did not look at the truck. She looked at Victor. What is this mess? Individual claims to own 221 Crest, ma'am. Eleanor's head turned like a turret. She took in the faded work shirt, the paint-stained boots, the hands that still carried calluses from years framing houses before he ever bought one. Her face shuddered completely. That's not possible. Jack held out the folder again. Would you like to see the deed, ma'am? Eleanor spoke only to Victor. 221 was purchased off-market by a Delaware holding company 3 days ago. I was told the buyer's representative would contact the board. I am the buyer's representative, Jack said. Among other things. She gave a single-syllable laugh that landed harder than any shout. It was the sound of someone who had never once needed to wonder if she belonged anywhere. Mr. Harlan, do you have any idea what that property is worth? $2.8 million, Jack answered, plus the half-acre lot beside it. My wife wanted a garden there. Eleanor's sunglasses came off slowly. Your wife? Passed 14 months ago. Lymphoma. She never got to see the house, but she picked it out in 2018 when we couldn't afford the mailbox. Parked right where that moving van is now and said, "Someday, Jack." I told her sure. She told me not to sure her. He stopped, cleared his throat once. The sound was dry in the July air. Eleanor folded her glasses with a click. That's a touching story, but a story isn't a title search. Milo had climbed out of the truck. He stood by the front tire, teddy bear dangling from one small fist, fabric worn thin at the ear from years of comfort. "Daddy?" he asked in the sudden silence. "Why is she being mean to you?" The entire gate went still. The only sound was the faint buzz of cicadas in the trees. Jack knelt in the gravel, one knee down, stones biting through his jeans. He took his son's free hand. "She's not being mean, buddy. She's being careful. She just isn't very good at it yet." Milo's face crumpled, then hardened in a way no 8-year-old should have to learn so soon. He pulled his shoulders back. "I matter," he said, loud enough for every phone now filming from the grass inside the gate. Jack's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile he had managed in 14 months. Residents were drifting out of their houses now. 15, 20, phones up, vertical video rolling. They thought they were documenting an intruder. Jack looked straight at Victor. "Your whole job is to check the resident list. So check it." Victor's jaw flexed. "I don't take orders from." He caught himself. The silence stretched, thick as the humidity. Eleanor finished for him. "From people who don't live here." That's how that sentence ends, Mr. Harlan. "You are causing a disturbance. Bradley, call the sheriff and get this truck towed. It's on association property." Marcus spoke up, voice cracking like thin ice. "Ma'am, I looked at the deed. County stamp. Blue ink. You can't print that at home." Eleanor stared at him the way you stare at furniture that suddenly spoke. Jack took out his phone, opened an email and held it up so she could read the subject line. Ridgeguard Services, closing of acquisition. The first line visible read, "Congratulations, Mr. Harlan. As of this morning you are the controlling shareholder." Eleanor's face drained of color. For separate phones caught it in 4K, the tremble in her signature red lipstick visible even at a distance. Jack slid the phone back into his shirt pocket. "That's why I asked you to read the folder." At 4:31, the moving van's air brakes hissed behind them like a long exhale. The transponder on its windshield registered that Tuesday to 221 Oakwood Crest Lane in the name of Jack Harlan. Pinged the gate system. The 14-foot panels began to swing inward with a low electric hum that vibrated in the chest. "Victor Spoon." "I didn't hit the button. I did not hit the button." Marcus answered softly. "It read the transponder." Jack bent down, picked up the blue teddy bear Milo had dropped in the gravel, brushed the dust off its ear with his thumb, and handed it back. That small gesture somehow carried farther than any shout. The fabric felt warm from Milo's grip. Eleanor found her voice again, sharp as broken glass. "Close it. The gate shuddered, reversed, and started swinging shut with a metallic groan. A collective groan rose from the residents pressed against the bars. Day one of the new life had officially begun, and the grind was just getting started. Day two began at 5:47 a.m. with the smell of fresh-cut cedar drifting through the open windows of 221 Oakwood Crest. Jack Harlan stood on the wide front porch in faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, the blue teddy bear tucked under one arm while he watched two county surveyors stake orange flags along the easement that ran behind the entire cul-de-sac. The bear's left ear was still slightly dusty from yesterday's gravel. He hadn't let Milo see that part. By 6:30, the first complaint arrived. A certified letter slid through the mail slot with a slap that echoed down the marble foyer. HOA violation notice number 4412. Unauthorized commercial vehicle on premises. 24 hours to remove or face daily fines of $250. Jack read it once, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the same pocket that held yesterday's email. Then he carried the teddy bear upstairs, placed it on the nightstand beside Milo's sleeping head, and whispered, "We're not going anywhere, buddy." Day 3. The grind tightened. At 9:12 a.m. Victor arrived with 2 uniformed deputies and a tow truck driver whose diesel engine rattled the crystal in Eleanor's front windows. They parked directly in front of Jack's moving van, which still sat half unloaded in the circular drive. Victor's Brioni suit had been swapped for pressed khakis and a navy golf shirt, but the Patek still flashed on his wrist every time he gestured. "Vehicles unregistered to the address on file," Victor announced, loud enough for the growing crowd of neighbors pretending to water perfectly green lawns. "Tow it." One deputy rested a hand on his belt. The other looked bored. Jack stepped out the front door holding a single sheet of paper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The paper was invoice number 4471 from the county clerk's office, dated that morning, showing transfer of the entire Ridgeguard Services portfolio, including the private security contract for Oakwood Crest itself. "New management took effect at midnight," Jack said. The words landed like gravel under tires. "Your contract with them was terminated. Mine wasn't." He handed the deputy the invoice. The man scanned it, eyebrows lifting. Then he looked at Victor and gave a small apologetic shrug. "Paperwork checks out, Mr. Harlan. Truck stays." Victor's jaw worked again. The Patek caught the sun as he clenched his fist. For the first time, the tremor in his polished voice was audible. "This is harassment." Jack met his eyes. Day 3, Victor. 19 days until the association's annual meeting. Plenty of time. He turned and walked back inside. The blue teddy bear waited on the hall table now, one button eye reflecting the chandelier light like a quiet witness. Day 5 delivered the first real mini-crisis. At 2:14 a.m., the power cut out across the entire cul-de-sac. Not a flicker. A hard, deliberate blackout. Refrigerators groaned silent. Security cameras went dark. Someone had flipped the master breaker at the neighborhood substation 2 blocks away, and the lock on its chain-link gate had been cut clean. Jack stood on the porch in the sudden dark, listening to the neighborhood wake up in overlapping shouts and flashlight beams. Milo's small voice drifted down from the upstairs window. "Daddy, I've got you," Jack called back, calm. He felt the teddy bear's worn fabric in his back pocket where he'd tucked it before bed. The weight was strangely reassuring. Within 11 minutes, he had the portable generator from the moving van purring in the side yard. Fuel smell mixed with night-blooming jasmine. By 2:37 a.m., every house on the street had received a text from an unknown number offering temporary power drops using heavy-duty outdoor extension cords Jack had brought in bulk. Most accepted. Eleanor's porch light stayed stubbornly off. At sunrise, the sheriff's department arrived to investigate the sabotage. They found the cut lock. They also found fresh footprints leading straight to Victor's garage. But Victor had an alibi, of course. A 2 a.m. time-stamped receipt from an all-night country club 20 miles away. Scotch neat. 2 witnesses in Brioni suits of their own. The deputy closed his notebook with a sigh. "Looks like a prank, Mr. Harlan. We'll keep an eye out." Jack nodded once. Then he walked to the end of the driveway where Eleanor stood in a silk robe, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles were white. "Generator's loud," she snapped. "It's disturbing the peace." Jack studied her for a long second. The same red lipstick from day one had been applied in a hurry. One edge was smeared. "Peace is expensive when the lights go out, Eleanor. Especially when someone pays to keep them on." He left her standing there and carried the blue teddy bear back inside. Milo was eating cereal at the kitchen island, eyes wide with the kind of wonder only an 8-year-old can manage at dawn after a blackout. "Daddy, did you fix the dark?" "Working on it." Day 8. The countdown read 11 days to the annual meeting. Jack spent the morning in the backyard with a backhoe he'd quietly rented under a corporate account. The machine's diesel clatter carried over every fence. He was digging a French drain to correct years of flooding that the HOA had ignored. Mud smelled rich and alive. Neighbors gathered at the shared fence line, murmuring. Someone filmed on a phone. At 10:45 a.m., the second mini-crisis hit. A process server in a cheap suit appeared at the front gate holding a temporary restraining order. Eleanor's signature was on the bottom line, shaky but legible. The claim, Jack's renovation activities constituted a nuisance and threat to property values. The order demanded he cease all exterior work within 6 hours or face contempt. Jack read the document while the backhoe idled behind him, its bucket still dripping clay. Then he looked past the process server to where Victor stood on his own lawn 2 houses down, pretending to read the newspaper. Jack spoke loud enough for every camera. "Tell Mrs. Whitmore the easement I'm draining feeds directly into the retention pond she built without permits in 2019. The one that's flooded her own basement twice." Invoice number 4471 also included the engineering report she paid to Barry. "I have copies." He handed the process server a flash drive. "Give her this, and tell her the meeting is in 11 days. She might want to reread the bylaws she helped write." Section 14C. Controlling shareholder rights. The process server blinked, clearly not paid enough for this. He took the drive and left. That afternoon, the backhoe kept digging. The French drain took shape in clean, measured lines. Water began to flow exactly where it was supposed to for the first time in 6 years. By dusk, the smell of wet earth had been replaced by the scent of grilling steak from Jack's back patio. He'd invited the 3 single moms on the street whose houses had suffered the worst flooding. Their kids played with Milo on a blanket, the blue teddy bear seated between them like an honored guest. Victor watched from his upstairs window, silhouette sharp against the warm light. His Patek caught the reflection of Jack's grill fire and held it for a long moment before he closed the blinds. Day 12. 7 days until the auction of the community clubhouse. An event the HOA had kept quiet until the financial hole became impossible to hide. The new mini-crisis arrived at 8:19 a.m. in the form of a padlocked gate and a bright orange sticker that read condemned, structural failure. The clubhouse itself, a 4,200 square foot Mediterranean building at the center of the neighborhood, had been quietly red-tagged overnight by an inspector no one had seen. A handwritten note taped to the lock explained that bids for its emergency sale would be accepted starting at 10 a.m. the following Monday. Minimum opening bid, $1.2 million. Residents pressed against the new chain-link fence that had appeared around the property, voices rising. The building housed the only pool, the only event space, the only place many of them had held birthdays and graduations for 15 years. Eleanor stood at the front of the crowd in a white linen suit, voice steady but eyes betraying panic. "The association will handle the repurchase. We have reserves." From the back of the crowd, Jack spoke. He wore the same gray t-shirt, the blue teddy bear once again under his arm like a silent lieutenant. "You had reserves. They were spent on the private jet lease you approved last quarter, Eleanor. Line item 183 on the audited report you never sent out. I have the copies." Phones rose again. Someone actually gasped. Victor stepped forward, voice tight. "This is speculation." Jack held up a second document. The paper was still warm from the printer in his makeshift office. "It's math. And the math says the only way the association clears the lien is if someone buys the building at auction and donates it back. Or the whole place gets turned into condos by an outside developer. Your choice is in 7 days." He looked straight at Eleanor, then at Victor. Day 12. The grind continues. Milo tugged at Jack's free hand. The boy's fingers were sticky with maple syrup from breakfast. Jack handed him the teddy bear without thinking. The small boy hugged it tight against his chest, right there in front of 30 witnesses, and the sight of that worn blue fabric seemed to quiet the crowd more than any spreadsheet ever could. Later that evening, at 9:47 p.m., a single knock sounded on Jack's front door. Victor stood on the porch alone. No Brioni tonight, just an open-collared dress shirt and exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. The paycheck was still there, but it looked heavier somehow. He didn't wait for an invitation. "I need to see the full engineering report, the one you keep waving around." Jack studied him for 5 full seconds. Then he stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and Milo's strawberry shampoo. The blue teddy bear sat on the entry table again, one ear still faintly dusty. Victor's eyes tracked to it, then away. His voice dropped. "Privately, before this gets worse." Jack closed the door behind them. The grind had just found its first crack. The next morning, day 13, broke cold and gray over the parking lot of the old community center. Jack arrived at 6:12 a.m. with 2 thermoses of coffee and a fresh stack of printouts. The blue teddy bear was tucked inside his jacket, its worn ear brushing his ribs like a heartbeat. He had slept 4 hours. That was enough. He spent the first 90 minutes alone in the basement boiler room, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. The same room where he once spent 287 nights during the original retrofit nobody remembered. Pipes still carried his handwriting in faded Sharpie on the valves. Pressure limits, torque specs, the exact date each weld had passed inspection. At 7:45 a.m., the first board member showed up. Then 3 more. Then Eleanor. Her heels clicked across the concrete like accusations. She stopped at the top of the stairs and looked down at him the way people look at something stuck to their shoe. "You're trespassing," she said. Jack didn't look up from the pressure gauge. Article 14, Section 3 of the bylaws. Any resident may inspect common infrastructure with 48 hours notice. I gave you 49 yesterday in writing. Invoice number 4471, if you're still keeping score. She descended anyway. The smell of damp concrete and old motor oil filled the stairwell behind her. When she reached the bottom, her arms were folded so tight the knuckles showed white. "This building is condemned, Jack. The city inspector signed it yesterday at 4:17 p.m. You're wasting everyone's time." He finally turned. His eyes were calm, almost gentle. The inspector signed off on a visual only. He never saw these. Jack tapped the clipboard. Structural bolts torqued to 180 foot-pounds in 2011. Load-bearing beams still within 2% of original spec. The foundation crack everyone's screaming about? Cosmetic. I mapped it with a laser level at 2:14 a.m. last night. It hasn't moved a millimeter in 14 years. Eleanor's mouth opened, closed. For the first time, the polished certainty cracked. "You're a single father with a part-time mechanic gig. Since when do you read structural reports?" Jack offered a small shrug. "Since I wrote half of them." He let the silence stretch. Then he handed her a single sheet. The paper carried the faint scent of the lemon polish he used on his own kitchen table. On it were 17 signatures from licensed engineers, dated between 2009 and 2022. His name wasn't on any of them, but the stamp at the bottom of each page read the same. Reviewed and approved by the firm that had quietly vanished from public records after a quiet settlement in 2013. Eleanor stared at the sheet until her hands trembled. This doesn't change the lien. It changes the value, Jack said. Yesterday the building was scrap. Today it has a remaining service life of 38 years. That's $3.2 million in avoided demolition and replacement costs. The bank knows math even if you don't. He turned back to the boiler. The conversation was over. By 10:30 a.m. the parking lot held 20 cars. Phones were out again. Someone had started a live stream. Victor arrived in the same open-collared shirt from the night before. The paycheck was gone. In its place was a cheap Timex with a cracked face. He looked like a man who hadn't slept either. He found Jack in the community kitchen wiping syrup fingerprints off the counter. Milo's breakfast chaos from the previous morning still lingered in the air like a memory. "Private conversation," Victor said quietly. "My car. Now." Jack studied him, then nodded once. He picked up the blue teddy bear from the windowsill where Milo had left it and followed. Inside the black Mercedes, the leather smelled of yesterday's rain and expensive cologne that had started to turn sour. Victor didn't start the engine. He stared straight ahead at the brick wall of the building. "I looked at the engineering packet you gave me last night," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Every page. The math checks. The signatures check. You buried your name so deep I had to call 3 different state boards before someone recognized the reference number on the stamp." Jack said nothing. He turned the teddy bear over in his hands, thumb tracing the faded patch where a button I had been sewn back on with dental floss in 2018. Victor continued, "I also ran the corporate filings on the LLC that holds the lien. Turns out it's a shell, owned by a holding company. That holding company lists an address in Delaware that happens to be the same address my father used for 3 offshore trusts before he died." He laughed once, bitter. "I've been trying to foreclose on my own family's mistake. And you knew." Jack finally spoke. "I knew the day the first notice was taped to the door. Day 3. Victor rubbed his eyes. "Why not just say it? Why drag this out in public like some slow execution?" "Because public is the only language you and Eleanor speak," Jack said. "Private apologies are cheap. I needed the association to see the math. I needed the parents dropping their kids off every afternoon to understand what they almost lost. And I needed you to feel the weight of every zero in those reserve accounts before you decided whether to keep pretending." A long silence filled the car. Outside, a child laughed somewhere near the playground. The sound cut through the tinted glass like a small blade. Victor's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry." Privately, "I'm sorry." Jack looked at him for the first time. "That's a start. 6 more days until the auction. The grind isn't done." He opened the door. The cold air rushed in, carrying the distant clang of metal from the HVAC units on the roof. Jack paused halfway out. "Day 14 begins at midnight. Bring better shoes. You're going to be on your feet a lot." He closed the door softly. The blue teddy bear stayed on the passenger seat like a quiet witness. Victor stared at it for a long moment before he picked it up. The fabric was softer than he expected. One ear still carried a trace of strawberry shampoo. Inside the building the crowd had grown. Eleanor stood at the front of the main hall surrounded by attorneys in dark suits. Their voices rose and fell in urgent waves. Jack walked straight through them carrying a new folder. This one was thicker. The cover read, "Alternative Financing Proposal, Confidential." He set it on the folding table that served as the association's war desk. The scent of fresh toner mixed with the older smells of floor wax and yesterday's coffee. "New option," he said. "Someone buys the lien at auction, forgives it, and the building reverts to the association with a protective covenant. No condos. No luxury units. Just the same roof that's kept kids dry for 29 years." Eleanor's laugh was sharp. "And who exactly has $2.4 million to throw at a charity case?" Jack met her eyes. "Someone who already paid for it once. In 2009. Before the association ever existed." He didn't elaborate, He simply opened the folder and slid the top document toward her. It was an old photograph printed in crisp black and white. A much younger Jack stood on scaffolding, hard hat tilted back, smiling the way only a man who owned the building could smile. Behind him, the steel beams still wore their factory orange. In his arms, he held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. A brand new teddy bear peeked out, tag still attached. The room went still. Jack's voice stayed even. Day 14. The lien isn't the only thing with a paper trail. He left the photo on the table and walked toward the side exit. Behind him, phones flashed again. Whispers rippled outward like water after a stone. Eleanor's perfectly painted mouth had gone slack. At 3:47 p.m., the second mini-crisis arrived in the form of a city work crew. 2 trucks, 6 men in orange vests, and a flatbed carrying a portable generator and a set of bright yellow lockout devices. They parked directly in front of the main entrance. The lead foreman, a thick man named Ramirez, unfolded a city order and began reading it in a bored monotone. Immediate cessation of all activity. Building deemed unsafe for occupancy pending full structural review. Any person inside after this notice will be subject to removal and fines starting at $1,200 per incident. Jack stepped out of the shadows of the breezeway. The blue teddy bear was back under his arm. Milo had insisted on bringing it when the sitter dropped him off after preschool. The boy now sat on a low wall 20 feet away, legs swinging, watching his father with absolute trust. "Foreman Ramirez," Jack said, "you and I worked the 2011 retrofit together. Seat 18C on the night shift shuttle. Remember? You brought your wife's tamales every third Thursday." The foreman looked up. Recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. "Holy hell, Chief, we all thought you died in that helicopter crash off the coast in 13. Jack gave a tired half-smile. Reports were exaggerated. Same as this one. He tapped the city order. The structural review was already completed at 6:58 a.m. this morning. Copies were filed with the department at 11:12. Your boss signed for them. Check your tablet. Ramirez pulled out the device. His thumb scrolled. His face changed. Son of a... The order was rescinded 2 hours ago. Somebody must have sent us the wrong packet. Eleanor appeared at the doorway, fury radiating off her in waves. This is harassment. Pure harassment. Jack didn't raise his voice. No, ma'am. This is competence. There's a difference. The crew began loading their gear back onto the trucks. Ramirez paused before climbing into the cab. He looked at Jack for a long beat. Whatever you're doing here, Chief, I got a cousin who works permitting at City Hall. If you need anything expedited, you call me direct. Day or night? Jack nodded once. The trucks rumbled away at 4:09 p.m. The crowd that had gathered to watch the lockdown instead watched the reversal in stunned silence. Victor stood at the edge of it all, hands in his pockets, the cheap Timex catching the weak afternoon light. Later that evening, at 8:22 p.m., Jack sat on the front steps of the community center with Milo asleep against his shoulder. The blue teddy bear rested between them, its single remaining button eye reflecting the glow of a distant street lamp. The boy's breathing was soft and even. Jack's own eyes were heavy, but his mind kept turning. 19 hours until the next board emergency meeting. 26 hours until another round of legal filings. 31 hours until the bank's final valuation landed on every member's inbox. The grind continued. He heard footsteps on the gravel behind him. Victor again. This time he carried 2 cups of coffee from the gas station down the street. No suit, no watch, just exhaustion and something that looked dangerously close to humility. He sat on the step below Jack without asking. Offered one of the cups. The steam carried the cheap, burnt smell of hours-old brew. I called my mother's estate attorney at 7:55 tonight, Victor said quietly. Turns out there's a codicil in the trust documents nobody ever triggered. It gives a former majority stakeholder right of first refusal on any lien sale. That stakeholder was you. Before you signed it all over in 2012. Jack took the coffee. The heat seeped through the paper cup into his palm. I remember the night I signed. Milo was 3 weeks old. His mother had been gone for 9 days. I thought a clean break would keep the building safe. Turns out clean breaks are just another kind of illusion. Victor stared at the sleeping boy, at the teddy bear, at the man who had once owned everything and asked for nothing. I'm going to vote against the outside developer at tomorrow's meeting, Victor said. Publicly, I'll read the full engineering summary into the record. Every page if I have to. Jack took a slow sip. The coffee tasted like battery acid and second chances. That's private apology number 2, he said. The public one still has a countdown on it. Victor nodded. He reached over and gently adjusted the teddy bear so it wouldn't slip when Milo shifted in his sleep. The small gesture landed heavier than any boardroom speech ever could. Day 15 starts at midnight, Victor said, echoing Jack's earlier words. Tell me what you need. Jack looked out across the dark parking lot toward the building that had once been his entire future. The same building he was now fighting to give away for the second time. I need the association to remember what this place felt like before spreadsheets and private jets, before status and appearances. I need them to remember why we built it in the first place. He paused. The night air smelled of wet leaves and distant rain. And I need one more reversal before the auction room fills with every person who laughed at the single dad in the gray t-shirt. Something they can't spin. Something that sticks. Victor stood. For the first time, his posture carried no armor. Then I'll make sure the room is full, he said. Every last seat. He walked back toward his car. The gravel crunched under plain black sneakers that had never seen the inside of a Brioni box. Jack watched him go, then looked down at the blue teddy bear. Its dusty ear caught the light one last time before he tucked it closer to his son's chest. The countdown ticked forward. Day 15. And the grind was nowhere near finished. The rain began just after midnight, a steady drum against the metal roof of the maintenance shed. Jack sat on an overturned milk crate, flashlight beam cutting through the dark as he traced another hairline fracture in the foundation wall. Milo slept in the corner on a folded blanket, blue teddy bear clutched tight under one arm, its worn fur still carrying the faint scent of the hospital laundry from all those nights 2 years ago. Day 15. 19 hours until the association's emergency vote. Jack's phone buzzed at 1:07 a.m. unknown number. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Harlan? The voice was clipped, female, mid-40s. This is Elena Voss, structural engineer for Pinnacle Holdings. We received an anonymous packet this morning. 27 pages of original stress calculations dated 2009. Your signatures on every sheet. Care to explain how our sealed bid package suddenly contains documents that were supposed to be destroyed in the 2011 fire? Jack let the silence stretch. The rain hissed louder against the corrugated steel. Those weren't destroyed, he said quietly. They were hidden. Same way I was. He could hear her typing furiously. These calculations prove the building's core can handle twice the load the current plans assume. If we go with the outside developer's retrofit, we're looking at catastrophic shear failure in under 7 years. How did you? The line went dead. Jack stared at the screen. Battery at 11%. He set the phone down and picked up the battered clipboard again. Page 1 of the original blueprints. His own handwriting from 16 years earlier, when he was still the silent partner who signed every check and never put his name on the masthead. At 4:22 a.m., the first text arrived from an unrecognized number. It's real. The 2009 calcs. Everyone on the engineering committee just got the packet. By 6:15 a.m., the group chat for residents, usually filled with complaints about parking, exploded. Jack didn't answer any of them. He simply brewed another pot of coffee in the shed's ancient percolator. the bitter steam mixing with the smell of damp concrete. Day 16, 14 hours to the vote. Milo woke at 7:30, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, is the bear still sick?" Jack smiled for the first time in days. "No, Buddy. He's just tired. Same as us." He handed the boy a juice box and watched him hug the teddy tighter. That bear had ridden in the cockpit of a CH-47 on 3 combat extractions in 2004. Its left ear still carried a faint burn mark from the night Jack pulled 3 Marines out of a downed bird outside Kandahar. No one in this building knew that story. Not yet. At 9:47 a.m. Victor arrived wearing yesterday's suit, tie loose, eyes bloodshot. He carried 2 large coffees and a manila folder stamped confidential. "Do not duplicate. Private apology number 3, Victor said, voice rough. "I called in every favor I had left at City Hall. The historic registry just placed a temporary lien on the entire property pending a full structural review. The outside developer can't break ground until it's lifted. That buys us 30 days minimum." Jack took the folder. Inside was a single sheet, his own faded signature at the bottom next to the words, "Lead Structural Architect, Phase 1. He ran his thumb over the ink, feeling the raised texture of the old stamp. "They're going to want blood for this," Jack said. "They already do." Victor leaned against the workbench. "For residents just filed formal complaints against me for conflict of interest. My own secretary won't look me in the eye. But I read the full 2009 packet into the public record at 8 a.m. Every page. On camera. It's already trending locally." Jack nodded once. The rain had stopped. Sunlight now slanted through the shed's dirty window, catching the blue fur of the teddy bear where Milo had propped it against a tool chest like a tiny sentinel. 11 hours until the vote. The next mini-crisis arrived at 2:14 p.m. in the form of a process server who stepped out of a black Escalade wearing mirrored sunglasses and a sneer that cost more than Jack's truck. "Jack Harlan." The man thrust an envelope forward. "You've been served. Pinnacle Holdings is suing you personally for tortious interference, fraud, and theft of trade secrets. 1.2 million in damages. Court date is set for next Thursday." The server's Italian loafers crunched on the wet gravel as he walked away. Jack didn't open the envelope right away. He simply stared at the blue teddy bear, remembering the night he'd carried it through customs in a plastic evidence bag because it was the only thing that still smelled like his late wife's perfume. At 3:37 p.m., he made the call he'd been avoiding for 9 days. The voice that answered was older now, gravelly from decades of cigar smoke. "Jack? Jesus, I thought you died in that helicopter crash in 07. "Not quite, Colonel." A low chuckle. "Delta doesn't die easy. What do you need, son?" "Access to the original load test data from the 2009 retrofit. And maybe a quiet word with the Army Corps of Engineers about who actually designed the shear walls everyone's suddenly so interested in." The colonel exhaled. "You kept the dog tag, didn't you?" Jack reached into his shirt and pulled out the thin chain. The metal was warm against his skin, the stamped letters still sharp after all these years. "Harlan J., 2004. "Never took it off," he said. "Send me the case number. I'll have the files decrypted and on your porch by 2200 tonight." "And Jack, yeah, next time you decide to play janitor for half a decade, maybe drop the rest of us a line. Some of us still owe you for Fallujah." The line clicked dead. Day 16. 6 hours and 12 minutes until the association vote. Jack walked back into the shed. Milo was drawing on the back of an old blueprint with a red crayon. The teddy bear sat in the boy's lap like a co-pilot. Victor showed up again at 5:50 p.m., this time with 3 members of the engineering review board trailing behind him like uncertain ducklings. They all wore the same expression, half shame, half fear. One of them, a woman in her late 50s named Dr. Patel, cleared her throat. "Mr. Harlan, we ran the numbers again. The 2009 calculations don't just hold up. They're elegant. I've never seen load distribution modeled with that level of foresight. You designed this building to outlive all of us." Jack looked at each of them, then at the blue teddy bear Milo had placed carefully on the workbench like an offering. "I didn't design it to impress anyone," he said. "I designed it so my son would always have a safe place to sleep. That's all." The group stood in awkward silence. Outside, the late afternoon light painted long shadows across the parking lot where, 9 days earlier, they had watched a single dad in a gray t-shirt get laughed out of the building he'd secretly saved. Victor stepped forward. His voice was low, meant only for Jack. "Private apology number 4. I had my assistant pull the original incorporation papers. Your name is listed as 70% owner under a blind trust. You could have taken everything the day you came back. Instead, you mopped floors and fixed boilers for 6 years." Jack gave the smallest shrug. "Boilers don't lie. People do." At 7:44 p.m., the final text of the day arrived. It was from an unknown number, but Jack recognized the area code, Washington, D.C. The Army Corps just certified the 2009 stress models as the legal baseline. Pinnacle's retrofit is now structurally illegal. Their stock dropped 14% in after-hours trading. The boardroom is in free fall. Jack set the phone down. The shed smelled of fresh coffee, wet concrete, and the faint lavender scent that still clung to the teddy bear's fur no matter how many times it was washed. Day 17 began at midnight with the sound of tires on gravel. Multiple cars this time. Headlights swept across the shed windows like search beams. Victor stepped out of the first vehicle, pale but determined. Behind him, 6 more residents climbed out. People who had once voted to replace Jack with the outside developer. Their polished shoes looked ridiculous on the muddy ground. Victor didn't waste time with pleasantries. They moved the vote up. It's happening at 9 a.m. sharp in the main auditorium. Every seat is already reserved. The developer's flying in his entire legal team on a private jet. They're calling it a hostile takeover of association governance. Jack looked at the clock on the wall. 12:19 a.m., less than 9 hours. He reached down and picked up the blue teddy bear. For the first time in weeks, he let himself feel the full weight of everything he had given up and everything he was about to take back. Milo stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about airplanes. Jack tucked the bear back against the boy's chest, adjusting the dusty ear exactly the way Victor had done 2 nights earlier. The small ritual felt like prayer. "Tell them the auditorium better be standing room only," Jack said, voice low and steady. "Because when I walk in there at 8:55, I'm not coming as the janitor anymore." Victor met his eyes. No armor left. Just a man who had spent the last 15 days watching his entire worldview crack along the same fault lines Jack had quietly reinforced years ago. "I'll make sure they're all there," Victor said. "And when the gavel comes down, I'll be the first one to stand up and say your name out loud." The headlights faded as the cars turned around. The night air carried the scent of approaching rain again. Jack sat back down on the milk crate. He unfolded the original 2009 engineering summary one more time, the paper so old it crackled like dry leaves. His signature was still there at the bottom, faded but unmistakable. Day 17. 8 hours and 36 minutes until the auditorium doors opened. The grind continued. The rain started at 3:47 a.m., a soft drumroll on the tin roof that made the old shed feel smaller. Jack didn't sleep. He sat on the milk crate with the faded 2009 engineering summary across his knee, running a thumb over the blue teddy bear's worn paw. The bear had been Milo's since the hospital bassinet. Now it carried the faint smell of motor oil and rain-soaked earth, the same smell that had clung to every late-night shift Jack once pulled in hangars half a world away. Day 17. 7 hours and 12 minutes until the auditorium doors opened. At 4:22 a.m., his burner phone vibrated once. A single text from an unlisted number, confirming seat 18C still vacant on the Gulfstream. Cargo hold cleared per your original spec sheet. Jack stared at the screen until it went dark. He did not reply. The Gulf Stream belonged to the man the world still thought had designed the entire water reclamation grid back in 2009. Jack had been that man. Then he had walked away, traded the corner office on the 42nd floor for a name tag that read maintenance and a little boy who needed a father more than the world needed another skyline. He folded the summary, slipped it inside the bear's threadbare overalls where the seam had split years ago, and zipped the tiny pocket shut. The bear had carried every secret for 17 days now. It would carry one more. Victor's second convoy arrived at 5:50 a.m., tires hissing through fresh mud. This time only 3 cars. The developer's advance team had already taken the stage in the auditorium, setting up branded banners that read, "Legacy Renewal Project," delivered by Meridian Group. The smell of fresh coffee and expensive cologne drifted through the open doors as Jack and Milo walked the half-mile from the shed. Milo clutched the bear tight, thumb in mouth, eyes heavy. Inside, the room was standing room only, just as Jack had ordered. 214 folding chairs. Every resident who had signed the petition against him. Every neighbor who had called him the guy with the broom. Victor stood at the back near the fire exit, Brioni suit rumpled, Patek Philippe glinting under the harsh fluorescence. Their eyes met across the crowd. Victor gave the smallest nod. Day 17. 3 hours and 9 minutes. The first mini-crisis hit at 6:15 a.m. A Meridian lawyer in a charcoal pinstripe strode to the podium and announced a surprise motion. Due to recent structural concerns raised by our independent inspector, we are exercising an emergency clause. The entire north wing of the community center must be condemned before any vote. That includes the maintenance shed currently occupied by one Jack Harlan. Effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone near the front muttered, "About time that eyesore came down." Jack felt Milo's small hand tighten in his. The blue teddy bear's dusty ear brushed Jack's wrist like a reminder. He stepped forward 2 paces, work boots leaving faint mud prints on the polished floor. "Show me the report," he said, voice carrying without effort. The lawyer smirked, slid a thick folder across the table. Page 47. Signed by 3 licensed engineers. You have 30 minutes to vacate before county marshals arrive. Jack opened the folder. The paper smelled of fresh toner and deceit. He scanned the diagrams, the falsified stress analysis, the forged timestamps. Then he reached into his coat pocket and produced a single yellowed sheet from 2009. The real stress analysis, the one he had written himself the night Milo was born. He laid it beside the forgery. The ink was faded, but the calculations were identical to what the community center still stood on today. "These numbers don't match," Jack said quietly. "Because they're lying." A rustle moved through the crowd. Victor shifted his weight, Italian shoes squeaking once. The lawyer's smile faltered. "That document is unauthenticated." Jack said nothing. He simply walked to the wall behind the podium, knelt, and pried up a loose baseboard with his pocket knife. The sound of wood splintering echoed. From the dusty cavity he pulled a small fireproof tube. Inside was a USB drive and a second copy of the original specs, notarized in front of a judge in 2009, the day before Jack disappeared from public life. He plugged the drive into the projector. Blueprints bloomed across the screen. His signature, his stamp, his structural reinforcement plan that had kept the building standing through 2 hurricanes and 1 sinkhole scare. The room went still. Victor's voice cracked the silence. That's the same grid we've been bragging about for 15 years. Jack met the lawyer's eyes. "You're trying to condemn the very foundations I poured. Foundations that kept your bonus checks clearing, Mr. Meridian." The lawyer's face drained of color. He reached for his phone. Jack's burner vibrated again. Another text. 17 minutes out. "Cargo secure. Jack deleted it without reading further. The bear in Milo's arms seemed heavier, its stitched smile aimed straight at the stage. Day 17. 2 hours and 4 minutes. They tried again at 6:51 a.m. A second Meridian executive, this one wearing a limited edition Rolex, announced they had secured an emergency injunction from a sympathetic judge 2 counties over. The vote would be postponed. The developer's legal team had already filed. Process servers were en route with papers that would freeze Jack's access to any community records, past or present. The crowd stirred, uneasy. A woman in the third row who had once handed Jack a pink slip whispered, "This is getting ridiculous." Milo tugged Jack's sleeve. "Daddy, are they taking our house again?" Jack crouched, eye level with his son, and gently wiped a smudge of jelly from the boy's cheek. The blue teddy bear dangled between them like a shared heartbeat. Jack whispered something only Milo could hear. The boy nodded once, serious as a judge, and handed the bear to his father. Jack carried the bear to the podium. Every eye followed the small stuffed animal. He unzipped the hidden pocket, removed the 2009 summary, and laid it flat. Then he removed something else. A single dog tag on a rusted chain. Not military, engineering, issued by the original patent office when the water grid had been classified as a national security asset. He held the tag up so the engraved numbers caught the light. U.S. Patent 7,412,887, J. Harlan, lead structural architect. The executive's Rolex caught on the edge of the table as his hand jerked. The watch face cracked against oak. Victor stepped forward without being asked. His voice was hoarse. "I think we all need to see the chain of title again. The real one." Jack looked at the clock on the far wall. 7:12 a.m. Day 17. 1 hour and 43 minutes. The third crisis arrived at 7:29 a.m. in the form of the developer himself. A sleek black Suburban pulled up outside the auditorium. The man who stepped out wore a charcoal brioni cut sharper than any in the room and carried a leather portfolio embossed with the Meridian logo. His shoes clicked with authority across the wet pavement. He entered through the side door, flanked by 2 assistants, and immediately demanded the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, tone smooth as the Italian leather on his feet. "This has gone far enough. Mr. Harlan is a valued member of the maintenance staff, but these theatrics are delaying real progress. We have investors waiting, contracts signed. The original designer of this facility retired in 2010. Whoever this man claims to be, he is not that person." The developer's gaze landed on Jack, on the blue teddy bear now resting on the podium like a witness. Jack said nothing at first. He simply reached into the bear's pocket one last time and produced a faded photograph, taken in 2009. A much younger Jack in a hard hat, standing beside the very man now speaking, both of them smiling at the camera. The developer's predecessor, the one who had bought Jack's patents for a fraction of their worth and then quietly retired on the windfall. The developer's polished mask slipped half an inch. His throat worked. "That photograph is taken on the dedication day," Jack finished. "Seat 18C on the corporate jet. I kept the boarding pass too. Would you like to see it?" A low murmur rolled through the auditorium, growing louder. Victor moved to the front row and sat down hard, elbows on knees, staring at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. Jack checked the wall clock again. 7:51 a.m. Day 17. 64 minutes. Outside, the low whine of jet engines began to descend toward the private airstrip 4 miles away. The sound carried on the damp wind, faint but unmistakable. Cargo doors opening. Something heavy being unloaded under tarps. Jack tucked the photograph back into the bear's overalls, zipped the pocket, and handed the stuffed animal to Milo, who had climbed into the front row beside Victor. The boy hugged it tight, the same way Victor had done 17 nights earlier in the shed. The developer cleared his throat, voice lower now. "Perhaps we should speak privately before the vote, Mr. Harlan." Jack looked at him for a long second, then at the 214 people who had once voted to erase him. then at his son, who was gently fixing the bear's dusty ear with small, careful fingers. "No," Jack said. "Everything that needs to be said will be said right here, in front of all of them." The jet engines outside spooled down to idle. Rain tapped the metal roof in a steady rhythm. Day 17. 51 minutes until the gavel. The grind continued. Jack stood motionless behind the podium, the weight of 17 nights pressing into his shoulders like wet concrete. The auditorium smelled of damp wool and stale coffee, the same scent that had clung to the break room the morning they'd handed him his severance packet. 214 faces watched him now. Some shifted in their seats. Others stared at the blue teddy bear in Milo's lap as if it might explode. Victor Lang finally lifted his head. The Brioni suit had lost its razor crease hours ago. A single bead of sweat traced the line of his jaw before disappearing into the silk knot of his tie. $43,000 that tie had cost. Jack knew the invoice number, 4,471, because he'd once approved the expense report himself. The developer's voice came out hoarse. "Jack, I didn't know. Not all of it." "You knew enough," Jack answered. The words landed flat, factual. "You knew I built the alloy formula that lets those cargo jets land on runways half the length of standard. You knew the patents were never properly transferred. You knew when you voted to liquidate my stake for 14 cents on the dollar." A woman in the third row, the same HR director who had boxed Jack's personal items, covered her mouth. The murmur had become a low roar. Victor rose slowly. Italian loafers scraped against the worn carpet. He crossed the 10 feet between them with the measured steps of a man walking toward a firing squad. When he reached the podium, he stopped, close enough that Jack could smell the faint trace of cedar from his aftershave. "Privately," Victor said again, almost pleading. "Please." Jack shook his head once. "They laughed when you called me scrap metal, Victor. They deserve to hear this standing up." Victor's shoulders dropped. For the first time in 17 years, the polished mask cracked completely. He turned toward the crowd, eyes glassy. "I was wrong," he said. The words cracked on the second syllable. "I humiliated a man who carried this company on his back for 12 years. I erased his name from the patents, from the history, from the building itself. And I did it while wearing the watch his own royalties paid for." He touched the Patek on his wrist as if it burned him. Jack Harlan didn't just design the wing struts. He designed the entire future we've been selling. I owe him everything. The silence that followed felt physical, like a held breath across 200 lungs. Victor faced Jack again, voice barely above the rain on the roof. "I'm sorry. I was arrogant and blind and cruel. I'm sorry I took your dignity in front of your son. I'm sorry I made you prove who you were in the only language I understand, money and power. You never owed us this demonstration. We owed you respect." Jack studied him for 3 full seconds. Then he gave the smallest nod. Outside, the jet's cargo ramp clanked open. The tarps came off with the sound of heavy canvas snapping in the wind. Inside the auditorium, the wall screen flickered to life. Satellite footage showed 6 flatbed trucks rolling through the front gates carrying the original prototypes, machines the board had declared obsolete. Each one bore a fresh plaque, Harlan Dynamics, patent 2009 to 0714. Milo slipped his small hand into his father's. The blue teddy bear rested between them, one dusty ear still slightly crooked. Victor stepped back. He didn't return to his reserved seat in the front row. Instead, he moved to the very back, standing among the junior engineers who had once been told never to mention Jack's name. The board voted unanimously at 8:42 a.m. When the gavel fell, the sound echoed like a starting gun. 214 people rose as one. Not in applause at first, just standing silent, eyes on the single dad who had never stopped being the founder. Later, in the quiet parking lot, rain misting the windshield of Jack's old pickup, Victor approached one last time. No suit jacket now. Just shirt sleeves and the raw face of a man who'd been hollowed out and refilled in a single morning. "I meant it," he said through the open window. "Every word. If you'll let me, I'd like to make this right. Not for the company. For you. For Milo." Jack looked at his son asleep in the passenger seat, the blue bear tucked under one arm. The same bear Victor had clutched in the shed when the weight of his own decisions finally crushed him. "Start by remembering the names on the patents," Jack said quietly. "The rest we'll figure out." Victor nodded, eyes wet. He reached through the window and gently straightened the bear's ear the way Milo had done earlier. Then he stepped back into the rain. 3 months later, the building on Industrial Parkway carried a new nameplate, Harlan Lang Dynamics. The lobby held a single display case. Inside it rested the faded 2009 photograph, the boarding pass for seat 18C, and one small blue teddy bear with a neatly mended ear. At the HOA annual meeting that same week, the board voted to return full ownership of the community center to the association with a protective covenant drafted by Jack himself. Pinnacle Holdings dropped their lawsuit the following morning after the Army Corps certification made their retrofit plans legally impossible. The case was settled quietly, with the community center receiving full clear title and a 6-figure donation to its maintenance fund. Eleanor Whitmore resigned her vice presidency that afternoon, citing personal reasons, and was not seen at another board function. Victor still wore the paycheck, but now, when people asked about it, he told the truth. It had been bought with money that never should have been his. He told the story every single time, and on quiet afternoons, when the jet engine spooled down beyond the runway, Jack would sometimes find the bear sitting on his desk. Milo's doing, usually. The boy liked to leave it there like a quiet promise that some debts don't need to be collected forever. They only need to be remembered. What matters isn't who holds the title or the watch or the corner office. It's who remembers the hands that built the thing in the first place, and who has the courage, when the moment comes, to say the names out loud, in front of everyone who once tried to forget them.